This is Build a Big Podcast. I'm David Hooper. I was on Twitter a few days ago, and I saw a tweet from David Crosby. Dude with the mustache, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Amazing musician. And I came on in the middle of this conversation. Somebody had asked him about the Doors. Love Me Two Times, Baby. Light My Fire, the Doors. 60s band. Jim Morrison was the singer. Here's what David Crosby said about him. Basically sucked. Guitar and drums, pretty okay. Keyboard was awful. His bass with left hand was abysmal. Horrible. Square wheel, bad. And Morrison was no effing good as a singer or poet. Poser. Sorry. Man, oh man. So David Crosby, great musician, man. Hit after hit after hit. Still successful 50 years later. Jim Morrison, dead, of course. But the band is probably bigger than ever in a lot of ways. I bring this up because I think it's interesting as podcasters how quick we are to judge other people's art. And by that, I mean their podcasts, the content they've got, their personalities. Sometimes we judge them on their podcast personalities, which isn't their true personalities. They're not always one and the same. I do a thing on my radio show called Dave's Demo Derby. And the radio show, if you're not familiar with it, syndicated broadcast show, it is called Music Business Radio. At the end of some episodes, what we'll do, we have people from around the world send in demos, and I will play those demos for the guest. I've never heard them. The guest has never heard them, and we'll give first impressions. Like it, don't like it. Here's what could be improved on. Here's where I think this would work in film and TV, maybe, or this would work well for this artist, depending on what the guest's expertise is. And something I've noticed, and this is hundreds of episodes, I've done this a lot, is that artists, the true artists, the people that are working in music as creatives, they are not, for the most part, critical or harsh of fellow artists because they get it. They get what it takes to put something raw on tape, to sweat over every word of the lyric of your song, every note, every chord change, every element of the performance that you've put on tape. They get it because they've done it and they're doing it. You know who's harsh? The business people. It's very rare for an artist to criticize another artist. And I'm not being critical of David Crosby. Maybe he's right. I think it can be hard for artists sometimes, such as maybe a Crosby, where you've been in the game for so long and you really are sweating and you are being compared with somebody who maybe had instant success or maybe had bigger success than you, but didn't work as hard for it. I get it. I get it. Listen, my new book is called Big Podcast. Spent 4.5 years writing it. And I've got guys that have released books in the same time period in the last month that are absolutely killing me when it comes to sales, when it comes to number of reviews, when it comes to response. It would be easy for me to say, oh, those guys suck. Like Krusty the Clown. That guy stole my bit. Be bitter. And it's easy for us to do that as podcasters. You're working hard. There's a guy with a podcast on the top of the charts all the time. He's not working as hard as you are. Or is he? We don't know. And that's my point. We don't know the work that goes into other people's work. I think we've got an idea overall, and that's why so many of these artists that you see, they're not going to criticize other artists. But I think when you're looking at specific people, that's where you get into trouble. You think, oh, that guy's not working as hard as I am. He's number one. I don't know if it's a jealousy thing. Sometimes people say that, oh, you're just jealous. Yeah, maybe. Maybe so. Maybe so. But I will say this, that I've never seen anybody with a long career who isn't putting in the effort. Podcasters, non-podcasters. Anybody with a creative endeavor, a business endeavor, nobody lasts for a long time without putting in the work. So consider this a public service announcement. Let's be good to each other. Let's be good to each other. When one podcaster does well, even if it's a guy who lucked into it, even if it's a guy who doesn't have the best quality podcast that he possibly could have, when that guy does well, we all do well. The more people find out about podcasting, the more people listen to podcasts. People who are listening to podcasts, they don't just stop at one. They find one, they figure out how it works, and they start going deeper. Think about how you found out about comedy or music. You find the pop stuff, you find the popular stuff. That's the stuff that you're exposed to. Then you start going deeper. Same for podcasting. So be aware of that before you start critiquing other podcasters. You say, oh, you like Podcaster X? That number one podcast in the business category? That number one podcast in the comedy category? Have you thought about this? You might also like blank. That's going to help us all out, and you won't sound like a bitter old man like David Crosby did. If you want more tips, tricks, strategies, sometimes philosophy like today, subscribe. I'm here all the time. If you go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe, you'll see 3 buttons there, one for iPhone, one for Android, one for a good old-fashioned RSS feed, so you can get this podcast anywhere you get podcasts. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've got some new updates coming. You want to make sure that you get on the mailing list while you were there. One of them, I'm air checking. Got the air check computer. I'm putting it together. Answer some simple questions. Going to help you get better with your podcast. Don't even have to listen to it. And of course, you want me to listen to it. There are ways for us to make that happen. Bigpodcast.com is how to get in touch. Go there, subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to the mailing list, and I will see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.